Community. I'm the tribe leader, and today is a little bit of a transition call, quite honestly. I'm super excited to have my friend, Dr. Lori Buckley here. She is a sex therapist, a life coach, a relationship therapist. I actually met her about 8 years ago when I was going through a divorce. And like most men, when we get divorced, we feel like absolute failures. And I didn't want to have that feeling. And I knew if I wanted to get remarried one day, I didn't want that marriage to fail. And I think my comment to you, Lori, was like, well, I'm never getting remarried again. It's going to be all just, hookers in Vegas. And you're like, no, that's not what you're about. You're going to find love again, yada, yada, yada. So we had a very intimate series of conversations. I know you pretty well. You know me pretty well. But what did I miss in the intro about who Dr. Lori Buckley is?
I think you did really well. Yeah. And, I'm glad you proved me right, because you have this beautiful family and it makes me happy whenever I see your Instagram post, and it just warms my heart. Yeah.
That's awesome. So I wanted to have you on today for a couple of reasons. And just if you see me looking over here, I'm going to keep an eye on the Facebook feed in case we have any questions. One is almost all the stuff we've been talking about that generate community is all business, lead generation, whatnot. And I think especially in this stressful time of stuck at home, being a teacher to your kids, with most parents are not used to, maybe being with your spouse a lot more than you think, all of this stuff is intertwined, right? Like we can't show up for business as powerfully as we want to if we don't have some harmony. I know that's one of your favorite words, some harmony in the home life. So maybe you could just talk briefly to this audience of salespeople, entrepreneurs, business owners, like just talk about a little bit of the stress that's showing up for people right now in this time of, oh yeah, you're stuck at home with your spouse, maybe gaining weight, maybe your kids are in your bedroom all the time, so it's not the sexy place it used to be. You can't get away for weekends. Like what's going on and what's showing up for people? And what do we need to know?
Yeah, good questions. I mean, look, everybody is being impacted by this, some more than others, some in much bigger ways. But there is a heaviness that is going on in the world. Some people are lonely, and some people wish they were alone. And, it's all of the above. But the reality is, whether you are struggling financially or not, or you have kids at home, or you're in a bad relationship or a great relationship, we are all struggling, and it's impacting us in ways that we may not even be aware of. And I'm all about work-life harmony. And I'm an entrepreneur too. I have a website and I do a lot of things that are entrepreneurial. So I understand, how we can get driven. I mean, all entrepreneurs, we're driven. Like we could work. But it is so important to have that harmony in our life, and especially in our relationships, because when we don't, it does impact everything we do, including our health and how we feel physically, how we feel emotionally, spiritually. All of those things definitely do impact our life. We're a whole being, and we need to kind of nurture all parts, and our relationships are incredibly important. I would say sex is important too. Get some, good hormones and things flowing through our body that help us feel better. And when we are happier, and when we're doing well at home, in our health, in all those ways, we're more successful. It's just a fact. So I'm happy to help any way I can.
Yeah. And why is that? Like if you asked me, like, what's the most important thing in your life? I would say, oh, my wife and my kids and whatnot. And I'm embarrassed to admit, last night after a 16-hour workday and being stressed and making up all this stuff in my mind that my wife's not working as hard as I do, and all the shit that just like comes to the forefront when we're stressed, right? Like I lost it with my kids in a way that I was like, oh, this is not me. This is not how I normally talk to my kids. This is not me ignoring my wife. This is not like congruent with what I would tell Lori or my wife or my friends what's most important. But it seems like in these times of, stress, social unrest, financial, challenges, whether we're talking to the loan officers who have more business and are making more money than they ever thought possible, or we're talking to the entrepreneur who's legally not allowed to open their business, all this stress builds up, and somehow the people that get the brunt of it are the people that we claim to love the most, right? So why is that why is that how it goes? Like, why do we take out the stress on the people that are the closest to us? Like, I should be telling one of my customers to fuck off and quit bothering me. Not like lashing out at my wife for wanting to go to bed at the same time and talk to me. Like I don't get the mental disconnect.
Make a couple of really good points, right? First of all, let's just say if you know that you can control your reactivity, right? You're not going to talk to certain people that way, like a client. Well, you probably can do it at home. So it's possible, which is always good to know. But when we're saying really stressed out at the end of our rope, all of that heaviness that we're talking about, that anxiety, we can snap pretty quickly. I mean, we're at home more, we're with those people that we love the most. We also can take them for granted sometimes, but I don't think we do it consciously. It just happens. It happens so quickly. So it's a practice to really not do that. Or when you do that, because we're human, I mean, it's going to happen. We're going to snap, and not to feel bad about it, but it's not about being perfect, but how do we recover from it? We can apologize and say, oh my God, I am so sorry. But it's also a time to take a look at what's going on in your life. Okay, maybe I need to be resting more. Maybe I need to be meditating. Maybe I need to be exercising. All of those things that we were talking about that impact our well-being, it shows when we are feeling on edge. It's a sign. It's something to look at and pay attention to. Pay attention to your body. Pay attention to what is going on in your actions. And it's important. So it's possible, but it's not necessarily automatic or easy. It takes intention.
Right. And we've got a few people watching here: Tracy, Vicky, Sean, Todd, Jeff, John, Debbie, Deborah, Daber. One day I'm going to learn how to pronounce your name. I apologize. But if you are watching this, do me a favor. Lori is just joining us out of the kindness of her heart and to give back. Click the little likey button or leave a comment or ask a question, and we'll get it here shortly. We'll also put up Lori's website. So, if you're watching this stuff, you know what to do to help us out in the group. But Lori, I want to make sure people have not just the concepts, but actually some tactical stuff. So if I'm the type of person who's feeling stressed out, I know I'm being a little bit more snippy with my wife. Like I said, maybe the kids are going to bed with us and then crawling into bed with us in the morning. So like sex is a little bit off kilter and not happening as often as it used to. Like if all these things are going on because we're stuck sheltering in place, what are some real like tactical things that we can do to either reconnect or, calm ourselves down or just not take those people for granted? Do you have a couple like ABC tips of Lori?
I absolutely do. So, I'm a big believer in rituals. And I believe your last speaker talked about the miracle morning. Rituals are something I talk about all the time in our relationships. If we're going on autopilot, it's like, okay, later, it's kind of like if we live in a town or a city, we don't go visit all of the places, the tourist places, because we'll get there one day. We sort of take it for granted. We don't really think about it so much. It's the same thing in our relationships and at home. So it really is being intentional and putting things on the calendar. I'm really big on sex dates, on play dates. I know a lot of people call it date night. Let's forget date night, because first of all, it may not happen at night. Second of all, when we think about date night, we think about dinner. But it's finding that time, but more importantly, it's creating that time to be together. Maybe you can't spend 3 hours together alone without kids, or you can't go out to a restaurant or a movie. I'm going to say it's probably the case right now. But you can create little spaces in time that are scheduled and that are intentional. And it is about playing. It is about connecting. Touch is incredibly important. It does calm us down and it connects us. So even if it's just snuggling together, skin on skin contact, doesn't have to be sex, although sex is good, a couple of orgasms couldn't hurt. But there are different ways that just the hugs and the skin on skin and that time together, not talking about kids, not talking about work, not talking about bills, really just connecting, being interested in one another. I do have on my website a card deck that I created for this exact purpose called CPR for Love, not to promote it, but I created it because there was a need for it. So it stands for connection, romance, and passion. Has all of the three. You can pick which one you want to address, but that's just one tool. There's lots of tools out there that you can use if you don't know. Like, how do we do it? What do we talk about? Because a lot of people don't know what to talk about anymore. And talking about important, intimate things and creating the space to do that, it's everything. So whether it is every day you have that time together, and if that's not possible, then you figure out a way to spend 30 minutes together. It's taking that time that is going to start to not just be great for your relationship, but also good for your soul.
Yeah, you mentioned that finding that whatever those moments in time, that 30 minutes to have sex or connect or have conversation. I'm sure I'm not the first married man with kids to tell you this, but the more serious life gets, right? The more businesses we are, wife's back to work, 2 kids. It's like even in those moments when we try to go out for date nights and have sushi where we're just going to connect and turn the phone off, it almost ends up being like a family board meeting, right? So how are the finances? What are we going to do with the kids? Are they going back to school? Well, should we spend the $2,000 for daycare or just continue to let them run amok at the house? When are we going to paint the garage? Like,
right.
How do we get out of that mindset? Because there's nothing sexy about talking about painting the garage. I remember reading like a Reader's Digest magazine when I was a kid, and it was like the 10 worst questions to ask during sex. Like, have you paid the gas bill? Like, that's just a boner killer right there. It's like, I don't want to go into like structural family board, did we pay the bills meeting when I'm trying to get hot and bothered with my wife or my girlfriend or my spouse. So how can we avoid falling into that trap of like, all right, we got rid of the kids, we've got an hour to ourselves, we've got this whole checklist to catch up on. It's like, no, I want to have some good conversation and have sex.
Yes, such a good question. First of all, I can think of worse questions to ask during sex, but that's another whole other thing. Yes, because those things are important. Whether it is the bills or the trash or the kids, like that's important stuff. It's not like, oh, don't talk about that. So you have to create in your rituals a board meeting too. So you have your board meeting every Sunday morning, before the kids wake up or when they go to bed. So knowing that you have that space and time, and maybe it needs to be every day, but you create that space and time to have your board meeting to run the corporation of the household because it's important. And you separate that time for your play dates. And I say play dates because it's about playing, it's about fun, and it doesn't mean you have to go out anywhere. You could just watch a movie together. You could play a game together. Again, you could just snuggle up together. You could ask each other interesting questions that you think you might know about your partner, but I promise you there are things that you don't know about your partner that you don't even know you don't know, because we change all the time and we don't even know everything there is to know about ourselves. So getting really curious, living in a place of curiosity and not knowing when it comes to our partner, when it comes to sex, all of those things can be really important. But really right now, and the busier we are, the more stressed we are, the more important it is to really create that time to be together, those pockets of time. So those are important things, like you said, and it's hard not to talk about if you don't know you're going to talk about it.
Yeah, so I need to get back to like a Sunday morning family meeting. I think when my wife and I think you actually recommended this. When my wife and I first got married, it's like, all right, we had all of our fun Friday night, Saturday night, whatever. And then Sunday morning, we kind of knew that conversation was coming. We were going to go talk about money, plans, retirement savings, all the boring stuff that, like I said, is just a massive boner killer. And you don't want to talk about at dinner if you're interested in having sex. Right. So much of this stuff sounds right. But I kind of even roll my eyes, and I can definitely see the audience out there rolling their eyes where it's like, oh yeah, sure. I'm going to just go tell my wife like, hey, we're putting our play date or sex night on the calendar for Thursday night, send the kids to grandma or tuck them in early. And then we're going to ask each other questions like, yeah, I get it. That works in like some sitcom or some rom-com movie. But if this is the first time, like if it's been a while since you really connected deeply with your spouse, how do you even bridge that gap? Because if I put a sex date on the calendar right now with my wife, she's going to walk in here and be like, were you doing another fucking coaching call? Like, what is going on? Like, what is this new thing we're trying? So yeah. How do you bridge that gap if you're trying to get started with reconnection? And by the way, I'm making it sound like my wife and I have this horrible marriage. Not the case at all. We actually have a very great marriage, just a few stressful weeks, as we're coming up on 5 months here in shelter in place. But how does one get started?
Yeah, look at marriage is difficult, so it's not like, oh, all married, you should be happy all the time. Like, no, if you are struggling, you have conflicts, there are things that are challenging in your relationship, it's because you're in a relationship I mean, they go together. So what you said is a good point. It wouldn't work if you said, okay, here's what we're doing. And by the way, why the family meeting is so important too. We tell our kids what they have to do. We tell our partner, even worse, what they are going to do or what they need to do. It is not going to work. So it's having a conversation. It's like, okay, this is happening and I want us to be happy. And let's talk about, how are you feeling? Here's how I'm feeling. I want us to feel close. I miss us being able to be alone. I'd like to make sure that I'm not spending all of my energy and time with work. I want to have more harmony in my life. I want to feel closer to you. I feel like we're getting, maybe more disconnected. So I want us to come up with a plan together. Let's take a look. What would you like to be doing? If we had some time together, what would be on your list of things you would like to do based on the current situation? And let's create a plan, which is, by the way, I'm going to say essential for big families, but I think it's essential for all of us, especially now. And there's so many things in our life that we have no control over. So having control over how we spend our time and having structure in our day, it's a lifesaver. And for kids, they need it. They need that structure, but we need it too. And so it's something we can count on. And like you said, if we know that we're going to be having sex, and by the way, when I say having sex, I don't necessarily mean, oh, you're going to have intercourse that night. I mean that you're creating space and time to touch one another and give and receive pleasure. How you do that is up to you. You could spoon, it could be, or you could give each other some massages. It could be whatever it is that you want. But when because it's on the calendar, that's what you're going to do. You're not going to talk about bills right before. Like that's going to happen. So you can prepare and so you can start the seduction and start to connect and start to tease and, be more affectionate and all of those things that day before it happens. So that's why it's so good to schedule these kinds of things rather than waiting for it to spontaneously happen. Time together alone is not going to spontaneously happen. It's going to take a huge amount of effort. And sex is probably the same way. Yeah.
So marriage is work.
It's not hard work if you do it right. When you become disconnected and resentful because you've avoided doing these things and you've avoided the important, difficult conversations, then you're talking hard work. But if you are intentional and you make daily loving efforts consistently, not perfectly, because none of us are perfect, but consistently, it's just small daily efforts that you make. It's kind of like, here's a good, we can relate, I know, on body and food and weight, and most of us can. If we just let ourselves go and we eat whatever we want, which by the way, I did a really good job the first 2 months. Yep. Pasta, I was baking bread, it was great, right? And it's like all of a sudden it's like, oh crap. What happened? Now losing that weight and getting back to where you were before, hard work. I mean, it's hard work. The older you are, the harder it gets. But if you every day, for the most part, you eat relatively healthy, you might, every now and again splurge on your favorite junk food, but you eat relatively healthy, you exercise. It takes an effort, but it's not hard work.
Right.
It's just maintaining and making sure that you're doing the things that you need to do to nurture your body and stay fit. It's the exact same thing in our relationships.
So I heard everything you just said, but my mind was stuck on, well, you don't have to have sex. You can just lay skin to skin and have some touch. And I'm like, in what world does that not lead to sex? And so maybe when we're talking about this, maybe this is the problem. Maybe this was a problem in my previous marriage. When it comes to men and women and how we view things differently, and granted, I'm going to ask you to make some gross generalizations here, and I know that every relationship is different. What are some things that men do poorly and well, and what are some things that women do poorly and they do well when it comes to like rekindling that relationship, keeping the sexual fire going? Like what do we give men a little bit of credit for, and what do they need to be working on? And same question for women.
And I think they go hand in hand. You're right. It's a generalization, but generalizations are based on some fact. So, so there's always exceptions, but there definitely are some things that we could do better. And the reason why I mentioned, you could do what you want. Not all couples feel they need to be sexual. There are couples who both people choose not to have sex. And if that's what they choose, I always want to respect that. I personally think sex is important and fabulous for a really thriving relationship. But we get to make our own choices. Okay, so here's what happens. First of all, men and women both believe that we're supposed to be spontaneously horny at the same time. That's a problem, right? So he
Does
wants
not happen that way. Doesn't happen that way. I can attest to marriages and lots of relationships. I don't think me and a partner have ever just been spontaneously horny all at the same time.
Never, especially if you're married, you have kids, you've been together a long time, you've got a pandemic going on, so it doesn't going to happen. But we still, consciously or not, think, oh, okay, so let's say, look, sometimes the woman is the one with the higher desire, sexual desire, but more often than not, but not always, it's the man. So he wants to have sex. So he basically says something or does something that, hey, you want to have sex? Hey, let's go in the bedroom. He does something that basically is, hey, do you want to have sex? Not necessarily that explicit. And her answer is no, because she's not in the mood. She's exhausted. The kids are, and there's a million things she doesn't want to. And again, we think the guy thinks there's something wrong with her. She thinks there's something wrong with her. She thinks there's something wrong with him. I mean, we all feel bad, right? We expect that to work. It's not going to work because it doesn't work that way. Women need to give themselves some space because they need to be stimulated before they get aroused, and they need to be aroused before they feel like having sex. It's huge. So that's why when we plan that space and time together to focus on pleasure, and yes, it's good if you can focus on giving her some pleasure without an expectation of sex. So if he's like, okay, I'm going to rub you and massage you because I want to have sex with you, she might, if she's not in the mood and she doesn't know this other model that I talked about, she needs to be aroused first. It's kind of like, okay, we got 5 minutes, let's just get this thing over with. Or she's going to be a good wife. Okay, I want to make you happy, so here we go. And then it's not very pleasurable for anybody. And before you know it, nobody's having sex because it's not very good. But when you create that space and time, understanding that her desire isn't going to happen until she's stimulated and then gets aroused and then feels like having sex, it changes everything.
Are you saying I shouldn't only give my wife massages if there's not an expectation of sex? I'm very confused right now. I don't think I've ever given a girl a massage without thinking that there was some chance of having sexual intercourse.
There's a difference between wanting sex and expecting sex. So I'm going to say, when you're massaging her, you are wanting sex and you're hoping and praying. It's like, oh yeah, if I do this, there's a good chance. I don't know what, 50-50 maybe. But when you...
Let's get to like 60-40, 70-30. I give a damn good massage, Lori.
For you, lucky wife. But you know what? If you expect it, it's not going to work. She's going to feel that. She's going to feel that pressure. By the way, if she's feeling that pressure, that expectation, and she can feel that whether you expect it or not. I mean, let's face it, you probably don't expect it because it's not a sure thing, right? So if she's thinking, oh, I'm supposed to, it's an expectation, it's a should, there's no room for her to get aroused. So either she doesn't get aroused and feel like having sex at all, or she says no to the massage right from the beginning because she knows what that means, right? Or she says yes out of obligation. Now, I'm not saying it can't happen where you massage her and she gets aroused and feels like having sex and you have sex, but that will work more often than not when she knows there's no pressure or expectation. And there are times that you two can touch and tease and kiss and all of those things without sex. The more that happens, the more sex you'll have.
You know, it's interesting that we're talking about this because I was talking about this with my coach in our business, right? And in our business, it's like when you start, you just love on the client because you don't have as many referrals, and you really connect deeply from them, and then from that you get other referrals, and it's like it's this whole relationship, right? And then at least in the mortgage business and in many other businesses, as you get more successful, it just becomes procedural, and there's a conveyor belt, and like this is the process to get the loan done, and you just don't love on them the same way. There's no business foreplay, for lack of a better term. I'm gonna write a book. I'm gonna write a book called Business Foreplay. We should write that book. That'd be awesome.
I will consult. Yes.
and I think like maybe the longer you get in your relationship, because I've been probably in 3 long-term relationships in my life, it just gets more and more procedural, right? Like there's less doting and loving and foreplay. And it's just like, all right, cool. Like, are we having sex tonight or am I having sex tonight? Like which one's happening, you know? So maybe you could talk about getting out of that rut for those people that have been together for 5 months, 5 years, 15 years, 25 years. Like I know there's people watching right now who are going to watch the replay are like, oh yeah, I'm totally in that rut. It's like, once a month on Thursday. And I'm not throwing my wife under the bus here because we have sex more than once a month on Thursday. But, you know, I know some couples, I'm actually in a men's group with some couples where they're like, yeah, that's just the new procedure.
Yeah, you gotta mix it up. It's like anything. I'll go back to working out. If you work out the exact same way with the exact same weights, you're gonna stop progressing. You're gonna stop growing. We need to get out of that rut. I believe in rituals, but part of the rituals are having surprises. So we know that you're gonna have sex every Thursday night, but what you do on Thursday night, well, you know, there's all kinds of things that you can do, which again, to plug my website, but there are sex toys and there's games and, you know, the card deck, there's ideas here. So romance, let's say you want to add some romance. What do? It'll give you ideas of things you can do. Simple little things. Or let's say you just want to ask questions to learn more. You don't know what to ask anymore. You can ask those questions. Or if you want to try something new sexually, you go to the passion cards, right? So it's just a tool, but you can also together come up with your own. You could say, okay, let's write out a list of things that we want to know about each other. Let's ask 20 questions. We'll play 20 questions and we'll each ask these questions of each other. And you could say, what would be romantic for you? What are some things that would feel really good that maybe we used to do that we haven't done, or that we've never done that you would like to do? And that could be, I mean, it doesn't have to be sexually, it can just be in your life. And having those conversations is another way to really discover some new ways to do it. But it takes that time and intention, because if you don't have those conversations, then you're just going to keep going on autoplay, on autopilot. And that is the worst thing that a relationship can do. Avoiding the difficult conversations, not making the effort to be loving, to seduce, to court, right? All of those things that we probably did at the beginning of our relationship that we stopped doing because we're busy. I mean, there's real reasons. We had a lot of stuff to focus on,
Right.
but that's why we're talking about this. It is not something to put on the back burner, your relationship or your sex life. And it is the best gift and the most important thing you can give your kids, which is not just a mother and father who are together, but who are happy and vibrant. And you know it when you see them, they're hugging and they're laughing together. Like that's the best thing you can give your kids.
I remember reading something on young men, and one of the key indicators of if like young men were emotionally open or stable was, did they see their parents show affection, kiss each other in public, things of that nature? Because guys, like, you know, we don't learn to grow up being affectionate. It's like boys punch each other, and then from a very early age, you know, somebody's calling you a bitch if you cry, and it's like there's a lot of trauma that goes on growing up as a man, which I think a lot of people are shocked to hear sometimes. But if you had loving parents who held hands and kissed in public and stuff like that, the men in this study were just like emotionally way more open and in tune with expressing their emotions. It was really good stuff, which of course then makes me want to be a better parent versus just the father that puts his fist through the wall, you know, once a year when he can't handle it anymore.
I mean, their world is safe. Their world is safe. It feels good. And it's not that as a parent, you can't ever get angry or lose it. Like, you know, sometimes we lose our stuff, and that's okay. You know, you don't ever want to obviously do anything abusive emotionally or physically,
Right.
but sometimes, you know, we're not our best selves. That happens in our relationship. It happens as parents, and we're human, but that's a good opportunity to show your kids, you know what, here's what happened. I am so sorry. And, you know, I need to do better. And that's what we do. Sometimes, like I say, we go below the line. We're not our best self. We get reactive. How do we recover? And those are great messages to teach our kids, even if they see us fight with our spouse. You know, if they see that, they need to see us making up with each other too. And that's really, really important. So it's not about being perfect and happy and loving all the time, but it is at least aspiring to be mostly really great and coming from a place of love and compassion and understanding. And we can't do that We cannot do that if we are, at the edge of our anxiety, if we're not taking care of ourselves emotionally or physically. That's why it's so important.
So it's almost like we've spoken before, because I feel like you segued nicely, bringing up that, living below the line, and something that you taught me that showed up a lot in my previous relationship and does not show up in my current relationship is this idea of living below the line when you say yes to something, right? And a lot of times in a relationship, it's like there's this obligatory yes. Sure, I'll go hang out with your mom all day on a Sunday when I'd rather be watching the Steelers game or whatnot. And you gave me a lot of coaching around, like, if you're going to show up passively aggressively, just don't show up. Or if you're going to show up, be all in, be above or below the line. So, especially in this time when, like, we're stuck at home and we're maybe right on top of each other, and maybe we have different obligations and we're trying to balance all this. Can you talk a little bit about either saying yes or saying no, and deciding where that line is, and then how you live your life above or beyond that line? Because that was some coaching that you gave me that I thought was world class and makes my relationship way better.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's a model that I use with my individual clients, but certainly with my couples. And it's some people think that below the line is a bad thing. It's like, no, it's not bad to be below the line. We're human. We all go below the line. We get angry, we get hurt, we judge, mostly ourselves. So it's just to be aware of when we're below the line, and not to speak from there, act from there, live there, or make decisions from there, just to be aware of it. And I always say, when we have complaints in our relationship, and we always do, and our partner definitely does, especially if our partner is a woman. I mean, let's just, we'll be honest here. We can be really good at complaining, right? So, and it's okay to complain. It's never okay to criticize, but better than a complaint is a request. And so if our partner makes a request, hey, baby, would you go spend the day with my mom? Right? There's an opportunity to do a loving act, if that's what you choose to do. And if you say yes, it is a strong above the line yes. One, I'm doing it because I know it's going to make you happy and I want to do it. I don't want to spend time with your mom, but I want you to be happy and I love you. And you don't have to remind me. I am doing it, and it's a solid, solid yes. But if it is not a solid yes, then it has to be a no. No, here's why, here's what I can do. When you say yes from below the line, like you just described, you say yes, but under your breath, you're thinking, I can't believe I have to do this. And it's usually when we say to ourselves, oh, I have to do this. It's like, no, you get to do this if you choose, or you get to say no. But when you're coming from that place, either you don't do it or you do it. There's some passive aggressive behavior that usually follows, or resentment that builds, which is a huge relationship killer.
So I've got to go through this framework again, because this is maybe the most practical knowledge that people will get out of this call is, my wife asked me several weeks ago, she's like, hey, can I have a party at our house for my mom's birthday party? There's 10 family members that all live at the same place. They've all been sheltering in place together. So there's really no concern there. And in my mind, a party is like 2 or 3 hours. You have lunch, you have dinner, it's over. You cut the cake, get the fuck out of my house. In the idea of my wife and the Hispanic community, it's like the party's scheduled for noon. Everybody kind of shows up at 3, and you do 12 straight hours of eating and drinking and communing and fellowship and gossiping. And in past lives, I either would have said no and gotten a fight, or said yes and sat there for 12 hours miserably and passive aggressively. But the formula that you've given me is like, either yes or no, and here's why, and here's the act of service I can do. I was like, sure, if you want to do that, that would be great. I love your mom. I always say I've got a great wife, but I have a world-class mother-in-law. I love my mother-in-law to death. I'm like, I'll pay for everything. I want to have whoever over that makes her comfortable. And what I can commit to is kind of being mentally present for about 2 hours and hugging and kissing and, helping with the food. But eventually you guys all start speaking in Spanish. My Spanish isn't that good. I'm going to retreat upstairs and watch a movie. And she's like, great, that works perfect. So, party was at 1, people showed up at 3:30. I stuck around till 5:30, and then I went upstairs and watched a movie and passed out and woke up at 12:30 when they were still playing in the pool. And it was fine. But just that idea of like, if you're going to say, what's that?
You communicated.
I communicate. Yeah. It's like, if you're going to say yes, come from a place of like, yes, I love you. We're going to do this for service. If you're going to say no, or a partial no, like I did, like explain why, tell them how you can help with that act of love. And it's like, I would have been the guy 10 years ago before we met who just showed up and sat in the corner, passively aggressive, hated the thing, picked a fight with my, ex-wife on the drive home from being with her parents for 10 years. And I just refused to be that person anymore. So can you go through that one more time? If you're going to say yes like this. And if you're going to say no like this.
I'm so glad to hear that you refuse to be that person. Sometimes I wrote a book, 21 Decisions for Great Sex and a Happy Relationship, right? Sometimes it's just, we decide, right? I decided I'm not going to do that anymore. And I love that. There's a lot of power in that. And what you did was interesting. You made another kind of a request. You was like, yeah, you know what? Absolutely. And I can give that to you. Like, I want you to have that. But what I need to be able to do that is to know that it's going to be okay when I check out after 2 hours. So it's not always so black and white, but sometimes it is. You get the request. And by the way, when you make a request, you want to ask for what you want, not for what you don't want. Like if your wife would have said something, which I know your wife isn't like this, but if your wife would say something like, I want to have a party for my mom and I don't want you complaining about it or disappearing. Like that's not a good request. So
it's a bad request. That request goes nowhere real fast.
Right. Here's what I want. Here's why it would make me so happy. And then you want to do that. You want to do something that's going to make your partner happy. You don't want to not do something. When they say, don't do that, please don't do that. Like that doesn't motivate you. So she asked in the right way. You thought about that and you did. You said yes, because you knew it was something you wanted to do because you knew how important it was to her. You love your mother-in-law. It seemed like a great thing. And so you said yes. You could have said, no, here's why. If it was a no, like, no, here's why. I'm scared to death of, getting COVID and I just won't be able to relax and I don't want our kids getting sick. And it's just not going to be something that I can live with. But what I can do is we can have the biggest party in the world 3 months from now. That would have been an example of a no, here's why, here's what I can do. But you were able to say yes and then make that request or let her know, like, hey, as long as this is how I am, as long as I can go upstairs after a few hours, like that would be great. And everybody's happy. It's a conversation more often than not.
I was just typing that out in the comments. The no, here's why, here's what I can do. Like for the married couples or, anybody you're intimate with, this strategy will change your life.
Yeah. And I do want to say, I need to add, you want to say yes whenever you can. I mean, it should be like an 80-20 thing.
Right.
The yeses are important. If they're asked in the right way and you say yes, because relationships are give and take. I don't believe in compromise, or people say relationship for compromise. And when you compromise, nobody gets what they want and everybody suffers. But they're give and take. It's like, hey, I'm happy to do this for you. And your partner's going to be happy to do things for you. Now, if you are in a relationship where you're giving and giving and giving and giving, and it feels pretty one-sided, that's another conversation to have. But when you say yes, and this is true to sex, it's true to anything, and you are doing it from a place of obligation or resentment, or I have to, I would say don't do anything that you don't want to do, then you're not going to win. It's going to be a bad situation. And again, it can really create very disconnected relationships, passive-aggressive behavior, anger.
Ooh, passive aggressive is the killer, man. Once you hear that a couple has disdain for each other, it's over. Like go see Lori or just file the divorce paperwork. Like you're not going to fix it on your own. So
that's where the work comes in.
Let's just finish there. What are some of the telltale signs, or when should people realize, this is the person I agreed to spend the rest of my life with. We have kids together. Maybe we would have horrible financial hardships if we separated, but we need some professional help. Like what are the telltale signs that somebody needs some help above and beyond watching a 40-minute self-help webinar? Like they really need to be doing the work and getting some professional help, hopefully from you, but from somebody that's educated in this area.
Yeah, look, if you don't have those conversations, those difficult conversations, and you find yourself just really disconnected. I used to say, although I don't think it's appropriate anymore, you see what I mean, that when we drive up into, to our house and we see our partner's car there and we have a feeling of dread, it's a good sign there's something wrong. It's like you don't want to be home. And by the way, a lot of workaholics, not that there's any on this call, but workaholics, sometimes they'd rather be doing anything else other than being home. And again, something to look at. So if that's what's going on, take a good look at that. It is having those conversations that need to happen. If you haven't had sex, if you haven't been feeling appreciated or understood or loved, that's the conversation to have. So that's the first step. If you can't have that conversation without outside help, that's when you seek help. Because sometimes, people don't know how to communicate effectively, and it goes from worse to worse. It's just bad. And then people learn, they go, well, why bother? Because I tried to talk about it and you just got angry, and now I feel more disconnected than ever. So they give up. And by the way, there are a lot of people who give up on their relationship, even though they're together. So if you find that you have given up, or you feel like your partner's given up, and you have tried to connect and have an important conversation and it isn't working, then you definitely want to seek help. And I think there are a lot of relationships that stay together too long, right? That they're stay together and they're miserable and maybe they shouldn't be together. But there are a lot of couples and relationships and families that break up unnecessarily, and they didn't try. And if you don't try, if you don't do everything you can, especially if you have kids, to save your marriage, to save your family, good chance you will have regrets. And you don't want to do that. You want to know you've done everything you can. So that would be my advice and my guidance, because you don't feel bad about doing things. You usually feel bad about not doing things.
I think that's the way to end an interview. But if people want to find you, maybe there's a guy or gal in the audience who wants to do a consult. Maybe they don't even want to do it as a couple. They just kind of want to talk about themselves and what's going on, and talk about maybe some of the issues that we address, whether it's lack of sex, lack of communication, whatever. How do they find you? How do they book an appointment? What's the easiest way? Because I trust you. I've given you a lot of money.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate your trust in me. Go to my website, stuffoflove.com. On that website, you can connect to me to create or schedule some kind of remote session. I do obviously doing remote work right now, all this way through Zoom. But there's also I have YouTube videos. I have podcasts with some really great information. There's all kinds of things. If you sign up for my mailing list, I send out good information, some free courses even. I have one coming up next month. So there's all kinds of resources that you can find, but you can also schedule an appointment. So stuffoflove.com, and that's the best way to connect with me.
Perfect. I will continue to push people that way. And then I would like to ask a favor of you, that you hold me accountable. This is going to end up being probably the best year ever for mortgage professionals. I will be in desperate need next year of taking the 2 weeks off to go to your Italy couples retreat. So as often as you have to bug me, text me, make me pay you money and book the travel, I really, really want to go on that. And my wife really wants to see Italy. So feel free to be like borderline obnoxious once you get that rescheduled, to remind me to just send you the Venmo.
I definitely will. I hope it's happening soon. I already have an apartment and a plane ticket for April for myself. And that's when I usually get the apartments and everything lined up. So let's hope that we are through this soon. Everybody stay safe. That's the most important thing. But definitely nurture your bodies and your relationships. It's so important. So thank you, Scott, for having me. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. It's so much fun.
Thank you, Lori. I know, like an hour goes by and I'm just like, oh yeah, that was just like talking to a friend. So I appreciate you.
I appreciate you.